Hi everyone, and welcome to the first of our interview lessons. These are contained within every module and are with athletes or coaches or experts in their field, with the idea that we can try and bring to life some of the content in the lessons that you will have covered by that stage. The first of these interviews is with para road cyclist Millie, who came third in the time trial at the World Championships last year in Glasgow. Now, it's a really interesting conversation. You're going to learn how she applied a lot of the things we've already spoken about, but that we're going to speak about in some of the future modules in this course, how she applied those to her sporting competition last year. Unfortunately, the internet connection on this is awful, and so sound and picture aren't quite as good as they should be, but stick with it because the content is brilliant and it's a really interesting insight from a world-class athlete. I am so pleased that World Championship bronze medalist cyclist Millie has joined me. Hi Millie, how are you?
Hi Joel, I'm good, thank you.
Brilliant. And so I guess Millie, first of all, like just for anyone watching, tell us a little bit about you. Tell us about your sporting journey, how you got into sport, and kind of exactly what sporting disciplines you do.
Sure. I've been a paracyclist for probably the last 10 years, and maybe even a bit more now, which is a long time when I think about it. But things kind of took off for me in the last couple of years when I was selected onto the talent development program with yourself at British Cycling. That was in 2022, 23. So kind of coming back into the sport after COVID.
Yeah.
And from there is where it's taken off into sort of international level competition for me, being selected for the Glasgow World Championships in August of 23, and then the Rio Track World Championships earlier this year.
Mm-hmm.
So they've been my sort of major events. And I got into the sport way back when I was sort of 13, 14, and it was becoming more difficult for me to get around walking, and really cycling became like a mobility aid for me. And then I began to pursue it competitively, and here we are.
Grand. And so you've had, like I mentioned, you got a bronze at the Worlds in Glasgow in the time trial, correct?
Yes, yeah, that was probably the highlight of my cycling career to date.
Yeah, brilliant. So you come at this sporting competition from that athletic point of view. You're doing the sport, but your education as well also feeds into this. Just tell us a little bit more about, what you studied.
Yeah, so I studied psychology at Loughborough. Obviously, Loughborough is renowned for its sporting background.
Hmm.
So I did bits of sports psychology in there too. And I think studying that degree has definitely given me a lot of tools that help in sport. And I really believe that the mental side of sport is really a huge component of any competitive athlete's kind of toolbox. And so it's really important to work on that and not take it for granted.
Grand, great. So there's the psychological component of preparation. There is also logistical side of preparation. There's the strategy. There's also kind of reflection after the event. So all of these things are things that go around the actual kind of gun to tape sporting performance. And when we were working together and last year, as you said, and you went to Glasgow and competed, I think I'll always be really grateful that you went along with me for the ride of like putting in place a whole lot of this stuff. And I think we really worked hard on making sure the logistics were covered, the mindset was covered, and reflecting on kind of every single event as you went through that whole competition. Can you just tell us a little bit about the impact of that on that experience for you, and maybe what that experience might have been like if you just did none of that?
Yeah, firstly, I'm really grateful for that because I think it probably entirely changed my outlook on the experience, and it allowed me to be more immersed in the experience. It was something that could have been really stressful, I think, because for a bit of context, I was selected pretty late on in the process. So it was sort of 3 or 4 weeks prior to the Worlds that I actually received the notification that I was going, which was not a lot of time to get the logistical side of things sorted.
We had to scramble a little bit, didn't we?
Yeah, particularly with trying to acquire bikes and things. So that part was probably not as you would maybe want it to be, but that meant that we sort of really worked hard on the other bits which we could control. And I think having a plan in place for some of the stuff that I found really useful was looking at how we would maybe react to certain situations that could arise. So there was quite a lot of unknowns going into this for me, particularly as I was being classified, which I hadn't been for many years. And in parasport, a lot of athletes know that that can be a really pivotal moment in their career because it can kind of change everything, which it did in a way for me. But going into that, it meant that there was potential for some upset, some anxiety. And by having a full sort of mental map, we kind of made sure that we were ready for every possible outcome. I say every outcome, that's probably unrealistic, but we had a good idea of potential ways that it could go and how I might basically get around each of those situations. And by having that plan kind of pen to paper, it meant that I was felt much more secure going in, and I knew that whatever the outcome, we had a plan to cope with it.
Yeah.
I think again that's something that we might assume will be fine. We'll figure it out, but actually to have it all pre-planned just takes that off your conscience. It just allows you to absorb a bit more of the event. And it was a home worlds, and I had my friends and family there, and so I really wanted to make the most of that because I knew that it could be a once in a lifetime opportunity. I think it probably still will be a long time before the Worlds comes back to the UK. So yeah, it just allowed us to really enjoy the event, I guess.
That's really great. And I love that you said it sort of clear, took that off your conscience. I really like that language because there is in psychology, you'll be aware that there is this idea of the sort of the almost the pre-conscious mind and how that can just get flooded with all the stuff that we worry about and like clog up our kind of psychological process. And so we want to clear that kind of busy waiting room of stuff in our mind so that we can actually function as we need to when we're not just clogged up with the worry, like I said. And it's really great that it's really encouraging for me that that plan did make that much of a difference for you and allowed you to enjoy what otherwise, I mean, it was a stressful enough environment anyway because it was such a late call and a step up, but it still allowed you to appreciate and enjoy it. That's the process leading into the event. But then also you were competing multiple times through that competition. And so we had like lots of mini races, mini competitions. And so we had to kind of reflect and then quickly reset for the next one. So one of the things that's covered in this course is that the importance of reflecting on each performance that we do so that we can kind of learn and take stuff forward. I wonder in that experience at the Worlds or in any others that you've done, what do you see as the importance of reflecting? Like what difference does that make as part of your sporting toolkit?
I think reflecting on an event that's just happened, usually very high adrenaline, kind of have a lot on your mind after the event. And by getting that out and talking to someone about it or writing it down and reflecting on it, it allows you to kind of absorb what's happened a bit better rather than stay in that heightened state, because there's such excitement and adrenaline from, particularly if you've ever been in a velodrome with a crowd that big, with all the noise and everything that's going on, and even things like your caffeine intake, and it's all very heightened senses. So I think it's particularly important to reflect on an event so that you can move on to the next one with a clear mind, because it can be quite easy just to keep replaying what happened again and again,
Right.
Which I think is natural to an extent. But if you have a chance to actively reflect on what just happened, it maybe takes some of that away. So whether it was a positive or a negative outcome, you can start focusing on the next thing rather than getting too caught up in what's just happened.
Okay, brilliant. So it bookends the whole process and gives a really clear kind of beginning and end point to each phase of the competition for you.
Yeah, and when we were doing, how many races was it on the track? 4 or 5 in the Omnium, and then moving on to the road, I think that was really key because, otherwise you could just end up a bit of a mess essentially because it's all a lot to comprehend. So by reflecting, it just takes it away, takes away some of that, just the stuff kind of whirring around your mind immediately after a big event.
Yeah, definitely. And in your case, you were dealing with fatigue as well, because this was like lots of kind of big competitions over the course of a really intense sort of week. So I hear a really great application for anyone doing any kind of sporting event, like drawing a line under it, learning from it, but then being able to move on to the next thing. But for anyone who's doing kind of multi-day or multiple sporting events or anything that has rounds, even if it might be like a tennis tournament or something like that, being able to reflect just allows the full stop at the end of that one to start the new sentence and the new competition, whatever that might be. That's a really lovely kind of insight into your pre-competition prep and then your post-race reflection. So 3 questions for you, a bit more quick fire then, because there are other things that are covered in the course. Why do you do your sport? What's your motivation?
So I've had a long time to think about this, nearly a decade, but
Yeah.
I like to think I do my sport because it's really important for me to leave a legacy and a message that disabled athletes can do incredible things, and to try and get more people into the sport with disabilities, put simply, because even in the time from when I first started to now, there's not been as much movement as I would have hoped. And I really would like, by the time I'm much older, to see many, many more people with disabilities taking part in sport, whether that's competitive or recreational.
Yes, absolutely. Great. And I'm really pleased that we can provide even a small platform for you to be able to say that, because I absolutely agree. I think it's incredibly important. And we're recording this in 2024. There's a campaign in the UK called Everybody Moves, and that hopefully is going to mobilize more people with disabilities into sports and help them to find sports clubs and things. So, a really important message, I think. Second of the more quick fire questions is we have a lesson in the course called World Class Basics. What if you were teaching that lesson? What would you include in it?
I think basically it's important to not assume that you are doing all of the world-class basics, because they are very simple. So the things like your sleep and your nutrition and the timing of your workouts and the getting your stuff ready to go before your workout, things like that, all add up to a lot more than the 1% that you're going to get from a nutrition product that's really specific. So really nailing those things, even though it might seem boring, is super important.
Okay, I love that. So it's a lot of the mundane, day-to-day stuff, the organizational stuff. Just like, we eat all the time, we eat every day, but if we can get all of those things right, then they add up to a really big win. Yes.
Exactly.
Grand. And then the last question is, so I think, and we talk on the course about celebration being a really important part of the event. So, if you've done a great thing and you're happy with it, or even if it didn't go according to plan, it's still a great thing that you went out and did and you tried to do something. So celebrating that moment of life seems really important to me. Do you agree? And if so, how have you celebrated your performances in the past?
I really like this one. I think this is something that you kind of taught me in our time working together, and it's to actually like plan what you might do beforehand, because I think after a big event, especially if you're like an endurance athlete, you could come home absolutely shattered, and the last thing you want to think about is what you're going to do to celebrate. So having it sort of maybe penciled in the diary, pre-planned with loved ones or whatever it is, it doesn't have to necessarily be anything like going out. It could just be, we often did like some sort of sweet treat,
Yeah.
some sort of chocolate or something that you maybe limit when you're training hard. But yeah, just to have an idea of something. I think the human mind as well is really basic, and so in some ways, not in all ways, of course,
Yeah.
but in some ways, just having a reward that you can think about as well when you're working really hard for months on end
Yeah. Yeah.
is a helpful tool, and it's not something that you should like be ashamed of. If there's something that you're not doing, like drinking or something for a long time, having a little reward at the end is another good way to add a little bit more motivation.
Grand, exactly. And that can be after an event, can't it? And after, a really involved process that's gone on for months. Or it can just be, at the end of a week or at the end of a day or at the end of a training session. Like we can make that really, really big or we can make it really, really small. But I think having that moment of just going, yeah, I did a thing. So whatever that, so like just marking it in some kind of a way is is really useful, and that doesn't even need to be material. Like as I'm chatting, it just strikes me that that can just be some moment of self-kindness where you just go, yeah, that was great, I did a really good training session, and just acknowledge that you did a good thing. That can be enough as well. But yeah,
Yeah, I think we have a tendency to maybe be quite hard on ourselves. So just as you say, a moment of some sort of kindness and self-reflection is another really good tool.
grand. That sounds like a really good place to finish. I really appreciate your time. Thank you very much. And for anyone watching and listening, I hope you found that useful. Thanks, Millie.